My name is Effie, and at 57 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was sitting in my kitchen last Tuesday, staring at an old video camera that had been collecting dust in my closet for years. The morning light filtered through my curtains, casting shadows across the table where I once planned my son's wedding with such hope and excitement. That $65,000 I gave them was supposed to buy happiness, not heartbreak. But sometimes the truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it, and what happened at that wedding reception will stay with me forever. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt taken advantage of by family, and don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of how a mother's love turned into the most expensive lesson my family ever learned is just getting started. Let me tell you about my son Marcus. At 28 years old, he was everything a mother could be proud of. A successful software engineer with his own apartment downtown, Marcus had always been my golden boy. Ever since his father passed away from cancer when Marcus was 16, it had been just the two of us against the world. He called me every day after work, sharing stories about his projects, his coworkers, his dreams. Every weekend he'd drive the 40 minutes from the city to spend Sunday afternoon with me, helping with yard work, or just sitting on the porch talking about life. Marcus was the kind of son who remembered my birthday before I did, who brought me soup when I had a cold, who still asked for my advice on everything from job decisions to what color to paint his living room. We had that special bond that some mothers only dream of. When he was little, he used to say I was his best friend in the whole world, and even as an adult, that connection never faded. Then 2 years ago, everything changed when he met Sarah. She was 26, a marketing manager at a tech startup with perfectly straight blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The first time Marcus brought her to dinner, I noticed how she studied everything in my house. Her gaze lingered on the family photos, the modest furniture, the simple table setting I had prepared. She was polite enough, saying all the right things about how lovely my home was, how delicious the pot roast tasted, how much she enjoyed meeting me. But there was something calculated about her responses, like she was performing rather than genuinely connecting. Over the months that followed, I watched Sarah slowly insert herself into our family dynamic. She had opinions about everything from Marcus's career choices to his weekend visits with me. During family dinners, she would casually mention her friends' expensive vacations, their designer handbags, their luxury apartments. She name-dropped restaurants I'd never heard of and brands I couldn't pronounce. Marcus, who had always been content with simple pleasures, began talking about things he needed to upgrade, places he needed to experience, a lifestyle he needed to achieve. I tried to give Sarah the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just nervous around me, trying to impress the mother of the man she loved. Maybe her constant references to wealth and status were just her way of showing she could provide a good life for my son. But deep down, something felt off. The way she would steer conversations away from Marcus's childhood memories, the way she seemed uncomfortable when I shared stories about his father, the way she always had her phone out during our family time, capturing the perfect Instagram moment rather than living in the actual moment. Still, I kept my concerns to myself. Marcus was happier than I had seen him since his father died. He was laughing more, going out, more, experiencing a world I had never been able to give him. If Sarah was the reason for his joy, then I would learn to love her too. That's what mothers do. We swallow our doubts for the sake of our children's happiness. The engagement announcement came on a Tuesday evening in March. Marcus called me, his voice bubbling with excitement, asking if he could come over with Sarah because they had news to share. I knew what was coming before they walked through my door. Sarah's left hand sparkled with a diamond that probably cost more than my car, and Marcus looked like he might burst from pure happiness. 3 weeks after the engagement, Sarah and Marcus came over for what I thought would be a casual dinner to celebrate and chat about wedding plans. I had made Marcus's favorite chicken parmesan, set the table with my good china, and even bought a bottle of champagne to toast their future. But as soon as they walked in, I could sense tension between them. Marcus seemed stressed, running his hands through his hair the way he used to do as a child when he was worried about something. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared determined, like she was preparing for a business presentation. After we finished eating, Sarah launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech about their wedding vision. She painted a picture of absolute perfection, a beachfront resort 2 hours north of the city, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She had researched every detail. The ceremony would take place on a cliff at sunset, with 200 guests seated on white Chiavari chairs adorned with cascading flowers. The reception would feature a 7-course dinner prepared by a James Beard-nominated chef, a live 12-piece band, and dancing under string lights that would cost more to install than most people's annual salary. As she spoke, I watched Marcus's face grow pale. He kept glancing at his phone, probably calculating numbers in his head. When Sarah finished describing her dream wedding, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat and mentioned that they were still working out the budget. The venue alone was $30,000. The catering was another $25,000. The band was $15,000. The flowers, photography, videography, Sarah's dress, the bar service, the transportation, the accommodations for out-of-town guests. It all added up to a sum that made my son's savings account look like pocket change. Sarah's response was swift and unwavering. She couldn't possibly compromise on her special day. This was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and she had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. She had already started telling her friends about the venue had already ordered, save the dates with the location printed in elegant script. Backing down now would be embarrassing, she explained, her voice taking on a tone that made Marcus sink deeper into his chair. That's when I made the offer that would change everything. What if I helped with the wedding expenses? I asked, my voice gentle but firm. Marcus's eyes went wide and he immediately began protesting, saying they couldn't possibly accept such generosity. But Sarah's reaction was different. Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning, though she quickly composed herself and put on a show of reluctance, insisting they couldn't take my money. I explained about the life insurance settlement from my husband's death money I had been saving for exactly this kind of moment. $65,000 that I had kept in a special account untouched for over a decade, waiting for the day when my son would need it most. I told them it would bring me joy to see that money create happiness instead of just sitting in a bank collecting dust. This was what my husband would have wanted, I assured them. This was what family did for each other. The transformation in Sarah was immediate and complete. Suddenly, she was full of ideas about how to make the day even more special. She talked about upgrading the floral arrangements, hiring a second photographer, adding a champagne fountain to the cocktail hour. Marcus looked overwhelmed but grateful, pulling me into a hug and whispering thank you over and over again. I felt like I was doing the right thing, giving my only child the wedding of his dreams, honoring the memory of his father by ensuring his special day would be perfect. We agreed that I would transfer the money directly to the vendors to ensure everything was properly handled. Sarah immediately began making calls, securing deposits, confirming dates. She was in full wedding planning mode, her energy infectious and her excitement palpable. As they left that evening, Marcus hugged me one more time and told me I was the best mother in the world. Sarah kissed my cheek and promised this would be the most beautiful wedding anyone had ever seen. The first sign that something was wrong came just 3 days after I transferred the initial deposits. I called Marcus to ask about the timeline for the remaining vendor payments, but he seemed distracted and short with me. When I offered to help choose between 2 catering menu options Sarah had mentioned, he told me they had already made their decision. When I suggested we might want to coordinate our outfits, since I would be in many of the photos, he said Sarah was handling all the coordination and would get back to me. Over the following weeks, my calls to Marcus became shorter and less frequent. Sarah had taken over all wedding-related communication, but somehow I was never included in any of the planning sessions. When I asked about dress shopping, Sarah explained that she was only taking her maid of honor and her mother. When I inquired about the rehearsal dinner, she said it was just going to be immediate family and the wedding party. When I offered to host a small engagement party, she politely declined, saying their schedules were too busy with wedding preparations. Every attempt I made to participate in my son's wedding was met with a gentle but firm rejection. Sarah had hired a wedding planner, a woman named Crystal, who seemed to share Sarah's vision of keeping everything exclusive and controlled. The few times I managed to speak with Crystal directly, she was pleasant but dismissive, assuring me that every detail was being handled professionally and that my involvement wasn't necessary. Marcus himself seemed to be caught in a whirlwind of wedding stress. The few times we spoke, he sounded tired and overwhelmed. Sarah was always in the background during our phone calls, and I could hear her whispering suggestions about what he should and shouldn't discuss with me. When I asked about guest accommodations, since many of his father's family members would be traveling from out of state, he said Sarah was handling all the logistics and would send information later. The distance between us grew wider each week. Sunday visits became less frequent, with Marcus citing wedding appointments, vendor meetings, and Sarah's family obligations. When he did come over, Sarah was usually with him, and she had a way of steering every conversation away from wedding details or family memories. She would bring up current events, her work projects or plans for their honeymoon, anything to avoid discussing the wedding that my money was paying for. I began to feel like a stranger in my own son's life. The boy who had once shared everything with me was now communicating through a filter that seemed designed to keep me at arm's length. I told myself this was normal wedding stress, that all families went through challenging periods during major life events. I convinced myself that after the wedding, things would return to normal, and my relationship with Marcus would be stronger than ever. The final warning sign came during what would be our last family dinner before the wedding. Marcus and Sarah arrived late, both looking tense and tired. Throughout the meal, they exchanged glances that seemed loaded with meaning I couldn't interpret. When I asked about the final head count and timeline for the wedding day, Sarah and Marcus looked at each other for a long moment before Sarah finally spoke. "Actually, we need to talk to you about something important," she said, her voice taking on a serious tone that made my stomach drop. "There have been some changes to the wedding plans that we need to discuss." The conversation that followed will be burned into my memory forever. Marcus and Sarah arrived at my house on a Thursday evening, both wearing expressions that immediately put me on edge. Marcus couldn't look me directly in the eye, and Sarah had that practiced smile she wore when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. We sat in my living room, the same space where Marcus had played with toys as a child, where we had watched movies together during his teenage years, where he had told me about his dreams and fears. Now it felt like foreign territory, with my own son sitting across from me like a stranger, and his fiancée taking charge of a conversation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our family. Sarah began with what she called a difficult decision that they had been wrestling with for weeks. She explained that as the wedding approached, they had been reconsidering the guest list and the overall vision for their special day. They wanted something more intimate, she said, more meaningful and personal. They had decided that a smaller celebration would be more authentic to who they were as a couple. I nodded along, thinking perhaps they were cutting some distant relatives or old college friends to make the event more manageable. But then Sarah delivered the words that stopped my heart. "We've decided it would be better if you didn't attend the wedding." The room went silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock my husband had given me for our anniversary. I stared at Sarah, then at Marcus, waiting for one of them to tell me this was some kind of misunderstanding or poorly timed joke. But Marcus just sat there, his eyes fixed on the coffee table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Sarah continued explaining their reasoning as if she was presenting a logical business case. She said they had consulted with both families and their closest friends about the situation. They had actually taken a vote, she told me, involving 12 people who mattered most to them. 8 of those people had agreed that my presence at the wedding would create unnecessary tension and discomfort. The reasons they listed felt like knives twisting in my chest. They thought I might feel out of place among their friends, most of whom were young professionals with different lifestyles and interests. They worried about generational differences, creating awkward moments during the reception. They felt that having me there might make Sarah's family uncomfortable, since they didn't really know me well. They wanted their wedding day to be stress-free and worry-free, and my presence might introduce complications they weren't prepared to handle. When I finally found my voice, I asked the question that had been growing in my mind since Sarah started talking: "What about the $65,000? Sarah's response was delivered with such casual indifference that it felt like a physical blow. "Oh, you can keep that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Consider it our wedding gift to you for being such a supportive mother-in-law." Marcus finally spoke up, but his words only made everything worse. "Mom, please try to understand. This is what Sarah wants, and I want Sarah to be happy. This is her special day, and if having you there would stress her out, then I think we should respect that." In that moment, I realized I was looking at a stranger wearing my son's face. The boy who had once promised to always take care of me, who had cried in my arms when his father died, who had told me I was his hero, was now sitting in my living room telling me I wasn't welcome at the most important day of his life. And he was doing it to please a woman who had just casually dismissed $65,000 as if it were pocket change. I could have screamed. I could have cried. I could have demanded my money back and told them both exactly what I thought of their cruel decision. Instead, I took a deep breath, looked my son in the eye, and said, "I understand. I hope you have a beautiful wedding." After they left, I sat alone in my living room until well past midnight, feeling an emptiness I hadn't experienced since my husband died. But somewhere in that darkness, a different kind of feeling began to take shape. Not anger exactly, but a cold, clear understanding that actions have consequences and some lessons can only be learned the hard way. That night, sleep was impossible. I walked through my house looking at decades of memories that suddenly felt meaningless. Photos of Marcus as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, all smiling at a mother who apparently wasn't worthy of sharing his wedding day. I found myself in his old bedroom still decorated with his high school baseball trophies and college graduation photos, and I realized that the son I had raised no longer existed. But as the sun rose, a different feeling began to replace the devastation. Not revenge exactly, but a quiet determination that this betrayal wouldn't go unnoticed or unaddressed. If my own son could dismiss me so easily, if Sarah could treat my generosity as disposable, then perhaps they needed a reminder of what they were choosing to throw away. I spent the next few days doing research that felt like detective work. I called the wedding venue posing as a concerned grandmother and learned that the guest list had grown to 250 people, not the intimate gathering Sarah had described. I discovered that Sarah had upgraded every single vendor using my money, choosing the most expensive options for everything from centerpieces to transportation. Most revealing was my conversation with Crystal, the wedding planner. When I called to ask about parking arrangements for elderly guests, she cheerfully informed me that there were no elderly guests on the list and that the bride had specifically requested a young, energetic crowd for the reception dancing. Crystal had no idea who I was, and her casual comments painted a picture of a celebration designed to exclude anyone who might remind the couple of family obligations or generational respect. The idea for the video came to me while I was cleaning out closets, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind focused. I found my old video camera, the same one I had used to record Marcus's childhood birthday parties, school plays, and graduation ceremonies. Hours of footage documenting a mother's love and a son's promises, all stored on mini cassettes that hadn't been touched in years. I spent the entire weekend digitizing those old recordings, reliving moments that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. Marcus at age 5 singing happy birthday to me with chocolate cake smeared across his face. Marcus at 10 proudly showing off the Mother's Day card he had made at school. Marcus at 16, just after his father's funeral, promising through tears that he would always take care of me and never leave me alone. The most powerful footage was from his college graduation just 6 years earlier. Marcus in his cap and gown, pulling me into a long hug while the camera captured his voice saying, "Mom, you're the strongest woman I know. Everything I've accomplished is because you believed in me. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making you proud." I contacted a video editor I knew from church, a young man named David, who specialized in wedding presentations. I told him I wanted to create a surprise video for my son's reception, a montage of special memories to honor our relationship. David was enthusiastic about the project, suggesting music and transitions that would maximize the emotional impact. The final video was 12 minutes long, beginning with baby photos and ending with that graduation day promise. Every moment had been carefully selected to showcase the depth of our bond and the sacrifices I had made to raise Marcus alone. The closing image was a photo of the two of us from last Christmas with text that read, "To the mother who gave everything yet wasn't invited to share this moment." Getting the video into the wedding reception required calling in a favor from someone I had helped years earlier. Tom was the owner of the audio-visual company handling the wedding's technical setup. I had provided bookkeeping services for his struggling business during its early years, and he had never forgotten my kindness. When I explained the situation, he was appalled by my son's treatment and eager to help deliver what he called a much-needed reality check. The plan was simple but effective. The video would replace the slideshow that Sarah and Marcus had prepared, playing immediately after the father-daughter dance when the room was quiet and emotional. Tom would ensure that the video couldn't be stopped once it began, and that every screen in the reception hall would display the same message simultaneously. As the wedding day approached, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't trying to ruin their celebration or humiliate them publicly. I was simply ensuring that the truth about family love and sacrifice would have its moment, even if I couldn't be there to represent it in person. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in late September, with the ceremony beginning at 4 o'clock and the reception starting at 6. I spent that morning in my garden, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind calm. Tom had texted me the night before to confirm that everything was in place, and now there was nothing left to do but wait. Around noon, I began receiving updates from Tom, who was on site setting up the audio-visual equipment. He described a scene of absolute luxury that my $65,000 had helped create. The venue was decorated with thousands of white roses and cascading orchids. The cliff overlooking the ocean provided a breathtaking backdrop for the ceremony. Sarah looked stunning in a custom gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, and Marcus appeared handsome but nervous in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Tom estimated that there were indeed 250 guests in attendance, all dressed in expensive cocktail attire and designer accessories. The crowd was exactly as Sarah had envisioned: young, attractive, successful people who clearly moved in elevated social circles. Not a single person over 60 was visible, and the atmosphere was more like a high-end corporate event than a family celebration. The ceremony itself was apparently flawless. Marcus and Sarah exchanged vows on the cliff as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, with a string quartet providing the perfect musical accompaniment. Tom reported that there wasn't a dry eye in the audience as they promised to love each other forever, though he noted that Marcus seemed distracted and kept looking toward the parking area as if expecting someone to arrive. The cocktail hour was a display of networking and socializing that would have impressed any business conference organizer. Champagne fountains, gourmet appetizers, and strategic conversations about careers, investments, and vacation homes dominated the scene. Sarah moved through the crowd like a politician, ensuring every guest felt special while maintaining the perfect Instagram-worthy smile. As the reception began, Tom positioned himself near the control booth, ready to implement our plan. The newlyweds made their grand entrance to thunderous applause, shared their first dance to a song I had never heard, and then prepared for the traditional father-daughter dance that would provide the perfect emotional setup for my video. Sarah's father, a successful real estate developer, led his daughter through a sentimental waltz while the room watched in reverent silence. As the dance concluded and the applause died down, Tom initiated the slideshow that everyone expected to see. But instead of the carefully curated photos that Marcus and Sarah had selected, my 12-minute tribute began playing on every screen throughout the reception hall. The reaction was immediate and profound. The first images of baby Marcus brought smiles and gentle murmurs from guests who assumed this was part of the planned presentation. But as the video progressed, showing scene after scene of mother-son bonding childhood memories and intimate family moments, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Marcus recognized his own voice from the graduation footage, and his face went pale as he realized what was happening. Sarah tried to signal the DJ to change the music or stop the presentation, but Tom had ensured that the video would play uninterrupted from start to finish. Guests began whispering among themselves, asking questions about who this woman was and why they hadn't seen her at the wedding. The final moments of the video, featuring Marcus's promise to always take care of me, played over a completely silent room. When the closing text appeared announcing that the mother who had given everything hadn't been invited to share this moment, the silence became deafening. Marcus left the head table and walked out of the reception hall, pulling out his phone as he moved. I knew he was calling me, and I was ready for that conversation. When my phone rang, I could hear the sound of waves crashing and Marcus crying before he even spoke. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice broken and raw. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. I hope you learned something today, son, I replied calmly, sitting in my kitchen surrounded by the peace I had found in making my point without saying a word. The week following the wedding was unlike any other in my relationship with Marcus. He came to see me 3 days after the reception, arriving alone and looking like he hadn't slept since Saturday night. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced with something I hadn't seen since he was a small child. Genuine remorse mixed with confusion about how he had gotten himself into such a mess. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place where he had done homework as a teenager, where we had planned his college applications, where we had celebrated job promotions and life milestones. Now it was the setting for the most honest conversation we had ever had about respect, family, and the choices that define who we really are. Marcus began by taking full responsibility for what had happened. He admitted that somewhere along the way, he had allowed Sarah's vision of their future to replace his own values and judgment. The wedding planning process had become so focused on impressing other people and creating the perfect social media experience that he had lost sight of what actually mattered, the people who had loved and supported him long before designer venues and professional photographers existed. He told me about the reaction at the reception after my video finished playing. Several guests had approached him asking who I was and why I wasn't there. Sarah's own family members had questioned the decision to exclude his mother from such an important event. Some of their friends had left early uncomfortable with the obvious disrespect that had been shown to the woman who had raised him alone and paid for much of their celebration. Sarah's reaction to the video had been telling. Instead of feeling remorse or understanding why I had taken such action, she had been furious about the embarrassment and the disruption to her perfect day. She spent the remainder of the reception trying to do damage control, explaining to guests that there had been family complications that were too complex to discuss. Her focus remained on managing appearances rather than addressing the actual problem. Marcus realized that my video had accomplished something no amount of arguing or pleading could have achieved. It had shown everyone present, including himself, the stark contrast between genuine love and calculated social climbing. The footage of his childhood promises and our close relationship had revealed what he was choosing to sacrifice for a marriage that was already showing signs of being built on the wrong foundation. I listened to my son's apologies and explanations without anger or bitterness. The video had served its purpose, which wasn't to humiliate him, but to help him see clearly what he was in danger of losing forever. I told him that my love for him had never wavered, even when his choices had broken my heart. That's what real family love looks like. It endures disappointment and betrayal while remaining open to healing and growth. The conversation revealed that Marcus and Sarah's relationship had been struggling even before the wedding. The stress of planning such an elaborate event had exposed fundamental differences in their values and priorities. Sarah's insistence on excluding me had been just one example of her tendency to make unilateral decisions based on her own preferences rather than consulting with Marcus or considering the feelings of others. In the months that followed, those differences became impossible to ignore. Sarah's post-wedding behavior continued to prioritize appearances over authenticity. She was more interested in posting photos from their honeymoon than actually connecting with her new husband. She made decisions about their shared living space social calendar and financial priorities without including Marcus in the process. The pattern that had led to my exclusion from the wedding extended into every aspect of their marriage. By Christmas, just 3 months after their wedding, Marcus and Sarah had separated. The divorce proceedings were swift and relatively amicable, largely because Sarah was eager to move on to someone who better fit her vision of success and social status. Marcus moved back to his downtown apartment and began the process of rebuilding relationships that had been damaged during his engagement period. The healing process between Marcus and me took time and patience from both sides. I had to forgive him for choosing someone else's priorities over our family bond. He had to forgive himself for being manipulated into betraying the values his father and I had worked so hard to instill. We both had to learn new ways of communicating that would prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. 18 months after that disastrous wedding, Marcus met Emily, a kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and a genuine interest in family relationships. Their first date was actually a Sunday dinner at my house, where Emily asked to see photo albums and hear stories about Marcus's childhood. She understood instinctively that loving someone means embracing their history and the people who shaped them. When Marcus and Emily got engaged 2 years later, the planning process was completely different. I was included in every decision from choosing the venue to selecting the menu. Emily actually asked me to help her pick out her wedding dress, saying she wanted the approval of the woman who would become her second mother. The guest list included 3 generations of family members, and the celebration focused on bringing people together rather than impressing them. At Marcus and Emily's wedding, I was seated in the front row during the ceremony and given a place of honor at the head table during the reception. Marcus's toast to his new wife included a special acknowledgement of my role in his life, and Emily surprised me with her own speech, thanking me for raising the man she was honored to marry. The video presentation that evening featured photos of our entire family, including several pictures of Marcus's father, creating a celebration that honored the past while embracing the future. That experience taught me that the video I had played at his first wedding wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about truth and consequences. Sometimes the people we love need to see clearly what they're choosing to abandon before they can appreciate what they actually have. Sometimes love means allowing people to face the results of their decisions, even when those decisions cause pain for everyone involved. Today, Marcus and Emily have been married for 3 years, and our family has never been stronger. Emily calls me Mom and includes me in holiday traditions that feel authentic and warm. Marcus has learned to value depth over appearances, substance over status. The $65,000 that once seemed like such a painful loss became the price of an invaluable lesson about what really matters in life. Looking back, I realized that my first video was necessary for all of us to understand the difference between conditional love and unconditional commitment. Sarah loved Marcus for what he could provide and represent. Emily loves him for who he is and where he comes from. That video taught us all that family isn't about perfection or meeting other people's expectations. It's about showing up, being present, and never forgetting who was there when it mattered most. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone throw away the relationships that define them, even if it means causing temporary embarrassment to save permanent regret. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love from their own mistakes? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life tales about family love and the lessons we learn along the way. Share this with someone who might need to remember that true family bonds are worth fighting for, even when the battle seems impossible. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is helping them find their way back home to the values that matter most.